The forces of evil are powerful, but they're not unbeatable.
Welcome to the Hen Report. This is Jasmin Singer.
This is Mariann Sullivan.
And this is the Hen Report. Our hen house is one of our weekly podcasts. I have to say I'm exhausted, but I was looking through the notes and I can't believe how exhausted I should have been like back when we started our hen house. I wonder if I was exhausted then, because we used to do a lot more than we do now.
Well, you didn't have 12 other jobs.
That's true.
But it is true. Now you've kind of like buried the lead, but
I know.
But yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk, because I was looking at this old episode because Will Potter, who's going to be on in next week, was our guest way back in 2011.
That's crazy.
2011.
You were 2011.
You were like in high school.
I was in my 30s, but I acted like I was in high school, so I see why you're.
You kind of look like you were in high school too. All right, so I looked at the episode just to remind myself when he was last on, and then I started looking at the show notes, and I'm just going to read it. Can I just read it?
Yeah.
In today's episode, we will tell you all of. This isn't the part about Will. This is just about, like what we've been doing. In today's episode, we will tell you all about our trips to New Orleans and Boston, both of which took place this past week. In New Orleans, Mariann talked about animal law. And in Boston, both of us talked about veganism. We'll give you the skinny on our experiences at the biggest veg fest of the country. That was the Boston Veg Fest, where I do remember speaking there. We'll also tell you about the workshop we attended back here in New York, where New York Times columnist Mark Bittman was the super special guest. I have no recollection of that.
I don't either.
And why? I guess, it was during his like don't eat meat until 6 it's nighttime or something. I don't know.
And then just
stupid.
And then just only eat cows. And
then it says our big birthday bash fundraiser was this past week too. So we'll tell you about that. What? Who were we?
What was in our cereal in the morning? Because
I can't even. Well, we were heroes. That's all I can say.
That's all.
Now we're losers, but we were heroes back in the day.
We are producing a lot of content though now. That's true. I think the thing is I'm doing much of it from my recliner. And you're doing we were out in the community.
I'm sitting at a table.
I'm not at my recliner right now, but it was hard to. I actually recently changed from a manual recliner to an electric one. That's what my future looked like from back in 2011. But anyway, our hen house, Rising Anxieties, comes out on Tuesdays. The Hen Report, which is this, comes out on Thursdays. The long form interview on Fridays. Bonus for our flock members comes out on Mondays. We are here on YouTube and on audio podcasts, so please subscribe.
Now, I was talking to some friends. I won't name names, and they was sort of intimated that we're doing too much content. It was hard to listen to it all. I was like, well, you don't have to listen to it all. Is that a problem doing too much content? I mean, assuming it's not bad content. I don't think they were saying it was bad. It was the quantity, not the quality. I think
I went more when she does the dishes, has a little phone stand, and she has TV on or something on her phone. And I went downstairs and I was like, what is she watching? And I started talking. She's like, can you pause my show? And I pause it and I see it's Sherry Franklin. And I'm like, oh, we just interviewed her. And then I'm like, oh, which is what you're currently watching. It took me a minute. It was very funny. She's like, don't interrupt this riveting programming.
It's very, well, she was listening to Sherry, not just to you.
I know.
To be fair. But it is very meta.
Soups. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad somebody's listening, and I hope she doesn't think it's too much content.
I don't know. So we are staying on a staycation here in beautiful upstate / Western New York, depending upon who you ask.
I've been saying Western New York because I thought that's what they said. This is not of interest to the rest of you in the world, but if you're in New York, and somebody who has lived here their whole life. Because I had to change from saying upstate. That's what we always called it when we lived in New York City, and that's what everyone called it. But I thought, well, up here they like to call it Western New York. And then I was speaking to someone who's lived here her whole life, and she said, we used to always call it upstate. I just used the term Western. She said, I don't know when people started calling it Western. I thought, what's that all about? Probably not much, but I'm going to call it upstate from now on. I think that there are some people who want to detach the connection to New York City. And there are other people who want to embrace the connection to New York City.
Sure.
Because, like, if you go to Philly and you say you're from the city, they're like,
yeah.
There are other cities. What city do you possibly mean? And I understand that,
Cherry Hill.
New York City does kind of dominate. But if you come up here, everybody knows what the city is. They're proud. They go to they go down to the city all the time. They go to Broadway shows. I like the fact that upstate New York embraces its connection to New York City. Anyway, that had nothing to do with anything. I'm just perseverating.
Well,
all right, staycation. I just want to say, I think we have to be very careful about staycations are delicate things. And I was thinking about this just before we started recording, because I was thinking about the past and how we started doing our hen house, which wasn't that long before we did that episode I just talked about. It was about a year before that. Mm-hmm. And we started our hen house because speaking of Philly, we went to Philly for the weekend, and getting away really does give you a new perspective and makes you start thinking in new ways. And we actually started a whole podcast, which changed our lives. And I think that you want to think of a staycation, not that we want to start a new podcast because we have enough of them, but a staycation, you need to keep that mentality of getting away, whether it's for fun or to create a new idea. Like, being at a new place helps you think in different ways. So I want to use the staycation in that way, if it's possible, and not just watch TV.
I know I am struggling like a little bit with, Moore and I are just not going to be on the same page with this staycation thing. And so I need it to feel a little bit like a little indulgent, I guess. And she just wants to just do crafts and not do anything else, which I also want to do that. But I need to have it feel
I don't want to
do
crafts.
That's fine. You don't have to.
I mean,
we're not
going on the same staycation.
No, but might have to get
some stuff together.
Yeah, like a mani-pedi, or I get like once a year or something. I think this might be the time. I don't know. Maybe I don't need that. I hate nail polish. It makes me feel claustrophobic. But there is a vegan cruelty-free nail place here called Pure Soul Nails. And it is nice to support them and to pretend that I'm doing something that I enjoy. In any case, we are going to.
That was so sad.
We're going to be doing.
I'm going to pretend to do.
What is our schedule? We're doing one episode.
Yes, we will have one episode. This episode is our only episode for this week.
Okay.
And there will be one episode coming out next week, and it will be a really special episode. Because hopefully, if everything goes to plan, we haven't recorded it yet. We're going to be interviewing Will Potter, as I mentioned, about his new book. That's why I went back to the show notes for that show in 2011, because that was the last time Will Potter was on the show. Mm-hmm. And we'll be talking about his new book, Little Red Barns: Hiding the Truth from Farm to Fable.
Yeah, it's getting out there. It really is. I mean, he does a great job of bridging the disconnect, I think. So that's cool. So
Will is an investigative reporter. He's a really good writer. And, unlike most investigative reporters, he investigates the actual great, great, great harm and sin of animal agriculture, and both on environmental and animal protection grounds. And there aren't a lot of people doing it. And he's a really cool guy, and he tells a great story.
Yeah.
And I actually wanted to mention it in advance, just in case some of you want to read the book before the interview, which might be interesting. Because I'm going to be reading it before the interview, so others
may as well. Also, Little Red Barns, it's called, right? Yeah, Little Red Barns.
Yeah. He tells stories. I mean, like I think that's such a valuable way to get people's interest. And actually, that reminds me, I'm gonna go back to there was a great quote on that episode too. Like it was all so good. And talk while I look this up.
Yeah, I was just I was thinking about storytelling just as a means of change making. When you said he tells stories, I think that it is such an undervalued part of change making for animals. And I think you can't possibly talk about storytelling in terms of social change with enough vim and vigor. It is such an important part of any social change movement. And I love that Will does that.
Yeah, and listen to this quote from Malcolm X. This quote, we weren't associating it to the interview or anything. We just always used to start every episode with a quote. And this particular quote was from Malcolm X. The greatest mistake of the movement has been trying to organize a sleeping people around specific goals. You have to wake the people up first, then you'll get action.
That's good.
Yeah, you got to appeal to people's emotions. I mean, of course, everybody in this movement knows that, but it's a good reminder. And telling stories is one way to wake people up.
Was that a quote from like when we used to start every show with quotes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we did that for years.
Yeah.
That was cool. That was really cool.
That was my idea.
I have no doubt.
Just saying. And then we stopped doing it, even though it was cool.
Most, if not all, of the good ideas came from you. I have
down here on our schedule of things to talk about. Jasmin's PT story. Is that a real thing?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So I've been
sounds exciting. Telling stories.
Yeah,
that's how you change the world.
Let's talk about my back pain. So I've been going to PT now for a few months, and it has actually been really, really helpful for this like thing on my rib related, back related.
All right, TMI.
Okay. So, but my PT person talks the entire time, which sometimes is fine, but I feel like I just say, you know, the whole time. And her 20-year-old daughter is like a vet tech, and she is training to be or something, and she talks about animals a lot. And so she's just like, you know, but then she'll talk about eating meat or, you know, like, oh, in one breath it's this dog who they rescued, in the next breath it's this chicken that they ate.
In other words, she's like everybody else.
But I know that I've mentioned I'm vegan. I just want to get the back pain in order when I'm there, you know?
Oh yeah. I mean, we all know that not every moment could be a moment of activism sometimes.
But she's sitting there like talking at me, and you know, she's very good at the PT stuff though. And she's sitting there talking at me, and then suddenly she says, someone made me a chicken salad the other day. And I'm like, oh, here we go again. And she goes, but it wasn't chicken, it was vegan. And I couldn't believe it. And like, I'm perking up, you know, like, what? And she's like, you know, how did they get it to taste like that? So we start talking about it, and she's like, I went home and made it. I went to the store and I bought the ingredients and I made it. And then she said, I think next time my parents visit, I'm going to make it for them and not tell them it's vegan. And then we start talking about like vegan places and vegan friendly places in Rochester. And I was telling her about Grass-Fed Vegan Butcher. We've interviewed them on our hen house, Nora Rubel and Rob Knipe. And I was telling her about it, and she's like, we have a lunch club here where like dozens of employees will get lunch from a different place. And she was like, I think we'll do that one. And so it was just like, there's not a big ta-da to that story, but I just wanted to share it because it just shows to go ya. You know what I mean? Like there are always
I know
moments
exactly
where
what you
it's
mean.
getting
like,
in.
Like we tell ourselves, oh, I can't do this now. Oh, this is too hard. Because we particularly remember the experiences that went badly when somebody like got annoyed with us, or I mean, everybody remembers bad things better than they remember good things, I think. Or is that just me?
No,
and so
everybody.
And so it is easy to forget that it's not really that painful to do this most of the time. And sometimes it actually, you know, comes out nicely. It's not like they all went vegan, but But that does bring up the other thing, which I didn't really want to talk about, but it reminded me, like I'm a complete wreck about the world. Like I'm not going to go into it. I know that a lot of you are as well. I even think that, you know, sometimes I mention it to people, not that often, but and they say, oh, I'm not paying any attention. I don't watch the news or anything. And I actually think they're lying because they don't want to talk about it either.
No, like
because
our barber.
Who could
our barber
be not
definitely does not watch the news.
All right.
There's
but
zero chance.
I guess there are
attention.
people like that. And, you know, I think that things are very bad and things are going to get worse. And this is very scary. And so these little acts of activism, sometimes I think they're really important, but I think it is a moment where I, anyway, really need to start like to get some kind of vision of like the future. And I actually saw Better O'Rourke doing this about democracy, but I think we have to do it about animals too. Like, this is the worst moment, I mean, I ever remember politically in my life. But like, it's not the worst moment for animals. Every single moment of my entire life has been bad for animals. So maybe this moment is, you know, we're talking about things are going to change. Gotta grab those moments where things are crazy and in flux.
I'm trying hard.
That's something I'm kind of holding on to.
But I'm trying hard to find the positive in what you just said about the animals.
Because it's a time of enormous social change. It's hopefully a time of enormous social change. Things are in turmoil. People are angry. Things are going to happen. Our government is going to shift in one way or another. And times of change can present opportunities. I'm not saying anything more specific than that, but most of the time, most people's minds are like our barbers, and they're just like not thinking about anything. And but now is a time when turmoil is entering almost everybody's lives, and will even more so. And those are moments when people are thinking about things instead of just blindly going through our lives thinking, oh, this is the way life is. This, you know, things are now different. And those are moments when people's minds may be more open. People, like, we see this horrible, horrible thing that's going on, and other people do not see it. If this is a moment where people's eyes open, not because of good things, but because of bad things, well, let's make sure, or try to make sure, that one of the things they see is animals.
And I mean, also, we talked about this.
Did that work? I don't know. Like,
I don't know either, but
it came from my heart. It really did.
A few months ago, we talked, or maybe less than that. What is time? We talked about how Big Ag is a supporter of Trump, and how, like, why isn't that making more people go vegan? I did hear from a listener after that saying, like, yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. You're really onto something with that. And obviously it wasn't, I'm sure it was your thought also, like every other good idea we've had in our hen house history.
That's not true.
Mostly. But it seems to me like that would be a way. In fact, will you ask Will about that? Because I think he might.
Write that down and send it to me, because I don't remember.
Yeah, because I think that would be a good question for him. Like, isn't
also,
that a
I'm
way?
going to be reading the book over the next week, so maybe there will be things in there that will ring this bell as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm kind of looking forward to reading the book. I am nervous that there's going to be bad stuff in there, but he's pretty good. And I started the beginning, and it was all about his origins in the punk scene, and it was really fun to read. It was really interesting. So I bet the whole book is going to be like that.
So many people began in the punk scene, like people around my my age bracket. I was, but I love that. Oh my
God, we thought things were going to change. I mean, not that I was in the punk scene, but everybody thought things were going to change.
Yeah.
The forces of evil are powerful, but they're not unbeatable.
Two things. One is, during one of our last episodes, I was talking about how I was cast to play Judy Garland in a play about Judy Garland that's coming up in December. And I told you I was nervous about that they would make me wear fur, because she wore a lot of fur. So that day, Moore and I go to the Bins, which is the clearance center for Goodwill. We go a lot.
They live there.
We live there.
It's an issue.
It's like you pay by the pound. Oh, I mean, look what I got there. Isn't this pretty? I'm sorry for our listeners, but it's just like a painting I got there.
Very pretty.
Klimt is the artist, Gustav Klimt. Anyway, I digress. So
it's not an original.
We're no. If it were
that would be a go.
Yeah, but anyway, so we found a faux fur, like that looks exactly like what Judy Garland
really
would wear.
an issue.
I know, but it was like that day. It was like a for. Okay, so that was one. Two, you were just talking about how you're going to be reading a book. I just read a book called
You read
Spent.
a book?
Yeah, it's called Spent by the
You read
wonderful.
books all the time.
I know. By Alison Bechdel, and Alison Bechdel, of course, is the sort of iconic graphic novelist and graphic memoirist who you might know her work from Fun Home, which was her book that became the Broadway show. And she recently had a new, I would say it's like, it's a novel, but it's what do they call it? Like autofiction. It's based on her life.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's kind of a popular.
Yeah.
I just read a graphic novel. It was exactly the same genre, but go on.
That's so funny. Okay. So Spent, I actually listened. There is an audiobook version of it that they sort of produced a little like a radio play. It had a whole cast. It had, Foley sound effects. It was really good. And then our friend Maya sent me the actual physical copy, which I enjoyed flipping through it too. It was funny. I just wanted to talk about veganism.
You listened to a graphic novel?
Okay, this is like maybe one of the first times, if not like the first time that this has ever been done. But Alison Bechdel was given the challenge of like, if we bring in like a script writer, how do you feel about producing this also as an audiobook? And she was like, sure. So it was like an all-star cast sort of.
Weird.
It was like all-star for me because it was a lot of Broadway people, and it was very, very good. I highly recommend listening to it. It's also like episodes. So every episode is probably like 10 minutes. So you don't have to listen to the whole thing.
I need something like that because I tend to like when I can't sleep, I tend to turn on podcasts about how we're becoming an autocracy. And it's really not the best way to put yourself to sleep.
True. But I want to talk about this.
So it might be too. I have to kind of, when I can't sleep, I have to put on things that are boring though.
Well, this would not be that, but I do want to tell you about veganism as it relates to this conversation. Okay?
Oh, finally. So we're going to get to something that's actually relevant.
I was trying.
I know it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault.
All right. So Alison Bechdel, who I have loved and admired for so long. In fact, I had an email conversation with her when my book came out because I was asking her for a blurb about it, which she said she would do. And then Fun Home came out like on Broadway, and she apologized that she just didn't have time to read the book. But I was still like, I don't care. I can die happy now because we emailed. I didn't say that. I thought it. I knew she was like somewhere on the veg spectrum. I still don't know where she is on the veg spectrum, okay? But in her autofiction book, there are mentions of veganism in, I would say, every single episode or chapter or whatever you want to call it. In a like, kind of making fun of it, but not the butt of the joke isn't veganism. The butt of the joke is just sort of like the vibe of the characters. They live in Vermont, as does she. They're like, as you would call it, and I'm air quoting here to make a point, like hyper woke. Like there's a lot of that in it, but it's all kind of a joke. Veganism is part of that, but it's not in a way that would be offensive, I think, to you. There's just a lot of like having tofurkey instead of turkey, and like there's a goat sanctuary.
Yeah, but she's been vegetarian. I mean, that's vegetarian.
We know she's vegetarian, but veganism specifically is mentioned constantly. In fact, at the beginning,
I bet she's in a shift.
Although I looked up, like, does she actually have a goat sanctuary? Because in it, her partner has a goat sanctuary. And no, but it said on the internet machine, which is incredibly reliable for factual information all the time, that she lives on like a goat farm and helps take care of the goats in real life. I'm very confused by this.
Goat farm? That doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't sound good, right? But I mean, there's talks about like the Montpelier co-op, which we've been to, like my mom lives in Vermont. There was just a lot of stuff that I was like, oh yeah, I've been there. Like it was very much a joke that I could fit right into, all of it. But I was talking to more about this, and she was like, interesting, but like if she's not vegan, then why would someone write about veganism and not be vegan? And then I said, oh, yeah, I mean, that's happened. We interviewed the author of the book, The Vegan. I'm blanking on his name right now. I'll have Vicky could put that in show notes if you want to hear it. It's a fantastic interview. We've definitely talked to other people who have written about veganism and not themselves been vegan. And Moore was saying,
as I recall about him,
Yeah.
it's almost like he felt like veganism was symbolic of a certain kind of thing that some people go through, like it was an expression of a change in your relationship with the world. I don't know.
And Andrew Lipstein was the author, and I loved that book and I loved that interview despite that part of it. But
I didn't love the fact that he wasn't vegan, though.
No, I didn't either. We
some people
hated
that interview.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just want to say.
Oh yeah, and we dug into a conversation.
Yeah, he
with
was
him
willing
about
to
it.
talk about it.
Yeah, he was.
Not everybody is.
And he even was willing to come on our podcast, which props to that.
Yeah.
I will give him props to that.
Yeah, he's.
But that being said, all right. So back to what Moore said. She's like, why would someone write about veganism? Like they know enough to know it's the right thing to do, but they have to be experiencing it through like a fictional character. And I thought that was a really good point. Like, I don't know if Allison is vegan or not. My guess is she's like on the vegan spectrum somewhere. I hope she's vegan.
I don't think most vegans think there's a vegan spectrum.
Well, I'm saying that.
I'm just saying.
In shorthand.
Like, that's a fairly controversial.
I know, but you know what I mean. Like
she's on her way to being vegan.
Yeah, maybe. But so
maybe.
This does bring up an interesting point, bringing the storytelling aspect back in. You mentioned storytelling before. I think storytelling is a phenomenal way of changing the world. As I mentioned, graphic novels are one example of that. Was the book, you said you read a graphic novel.
Oh, well,
tell us about
that's the other thing we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
This book, Just Another Meat-Eating Dirtbag, by a memoir by Michael Anthony. And it is also a graphic novel, which was fun to read. I don't read a lot of graphic novels, and it kind of reminds you of like being a kid and reading.
Yeah, I would just want to say I would come downstairs.
I liked
it. The funnies were always, my mom would pull them out on Sundays from the Star Ledger and leave them at my table. My brother would get the sports section. I would get the funnies.
We got the New York Times. It was so annoying. Anyway, they didn't have funnies.
Just tragedies.
It's really good. I really enjoyed it. It's about this, which I think is a frequent theme in people's lives. The struggle of a guy who's in love with a woman who's an animal rights activist and who becomes more and more of an animal rights activist, and how he handles it, sometimes poorly, then comes to handle it a little better. And I really enjoyed it. It brought up a lot of themes that really appealed to me. There was one thing that confused me. I'll show this to people, but I'll describe it for those listening. At the end, there's an epilogue, and it's a picture, and there are two kids. And I guess this is a spoiler, but and there's a signs pointing to the kids that say vegetarian. There's a sign saying vegan pointing to the woman, and there's nothing pointing to the guy. And I wonder.
The author.
Like, is he trying? Yeah, the author. Is he trying to say he's not vegan?
Yeah,
but then I Googled him, and there were lots of like references to like vegan events he's worked on. I didn't really quite get that part. I just thought I should tell people that I'm not absolutely sure that he's vegan. But other than that, if you like graphic novels,
what was the story about? Like, was it like? Can you just give me the 1,000-foot-high version of what the story was about?
Somebody, this guy, and I think. It's a memoir, but I think it might be a somewhat fictionalized memoir. As all memoirs are a little bit, but
mine was
I'm not
entirely accurate.
I'm not sure whether it's at all fictionalized or not. But he's an army veteran. He's been through a lot. Like he's really trying to get his life in order, and he falls in love, and he's madly in love, and she's a vegetarian. But as their relationship develops for one reason or another, she becomes more and more of an activist and then a vegan. And it's about his struggle with how to manage this when he doesn't really want to go vegan. And trying to like change her and manipulate her in ways that, are bad. But the theme of the book isn't that that's a good thing to do, about how, and I thought it was really interesting. I think it brought up a lot of the issues of the ways that people deal with us sometimes. Not wanting to confront it, but not really wanting to stop eating meat. And it's just about his struggles of like
That's
trying to manage
clever.
that relationship and finding himself in that. Yeah, it was
That's
very
cool.
clever. It was a good theme. It was one that I
Yeah.
think can probably resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah.
I just wasn't absolutely totally sure whether he was vegan, but it looks like he is. I don't know.
Well, fingers crossed. That's cool. I love that we just talked about graphic novels. Who are we? All right. Before we get to we haven't even mentioned it, but we are going to be having a conversation shortly with our buddy, the brilliant Michael Dorf. But before we get to that, I just wanted to shed light on something going on, which I think a lot of you know, if you're paying attention to the companion animal issues in your community. There is currently quite the emergency happening in animal shelters, and there's a Clear the Shelters effort, which is an ongoing effort across the nation for the month of August. And if you go to cleartheshelters.org, you can find a location near you. And so the ASPCA asked us to announce the Clear the Shelters effort in New York City, but they are all over the country.
Yeah, I don't think the ASPCA is running this effort, but they're participating in it.
Yeah, and the New York City situation is quite severe just because of the amount of individuals there. But they are happening all over the country. You could put your zip code in, find one near you. There are some special promotions. I know here in Rochester, they're waiving the fees a lot at the shelter. So if you're thinking of adopting, now is a good time to get out there because homes are desperately needed. And when we interviewed Sherry Franklin very recently, she was saying that the pandemic puppies, people who brought in puppies during the pandemic, a lot of them are being surrendered, which is just heartbreaking. Really,
yeah, we also mentioned,
heartbreaking.
particularly in California, where she was, but other places as well, of course, immigrants who are here who are frightened, like, that they're moving around, they might be leaving the country. Like, there's so much terror going on that, of course, it's going to affect animals. So there's a lot going on. People are scared about the economy. So a lot of people who might otherwise adopt are not going to do it right now. So if you can, it's a really good time to do it. And you guys all know this.
I am inspired. But, well, tell your friends and your family too. I am inspired by how Sherry Franklin from Muttsville, who was just on our Hen House, had such a generous disposition about it. Like, she really did inspire me to not just immediately think that person.
Yeah, not everyone who gives up an animal
had
a choice. Sometimes it was the only thing they were able to do. And
generosity of spirit.
And like, some people don't manage to get that animal to the shelter, and it can be embarrassing to bring in an animal and turn them into the shelter. So for people who don't want to be mean to them, because you don't know what they're going through. I think this is true in so many different ways right now. You just don't know what people are going through.
Yeah, like a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, I was doing a feature story for WXXI on the shelter system in Rochester. And I was sitting there at the shelter outside. They did not like that I was there. And there was this guy there who was very, very down and out. And he had a pit bull with him. And he was trying to surrender the dog. And he said he had to move and this and that. And the shelter workers came out and they wouldn't take that dog because this guy did not live in Rochester, like in the city of Rochester. And he didn't get the dog from this shelter.
Oh my God.
And he was like, I have nowhere to bring this dog. I need to get rid of him. It was just awful.
And, and to be sympathetic or try to be to the shelter workers, they can only do what they can do. Like, this was a city shelter. They're probably not allowed to take dogs from people who don't live in, like, everybody's stuck. The point isn't to find villains. The point is to do something for the animals.
I'm on all these neighborhoods.
Everything I say, I feel the need to say, well, you guys know all that. I feel like I'm preaching to the converted.
But there are a lot of animals being dumped. I'm on all these like neighborhood watch
that's
lists.
Not something that everyone is on top of. I didn't really know it was this bad.
But I just want to say, like, this situation where I just said, like, it's very, possible that dog wound up getting dumped because no one would shelter.
I mean, When people are desperate, they're desperate, and there's too
Yeah.
many desperate people right now.
Well, this is sad.
And
Let's talk
sometimes,
about
you know,
something
people
better.
are desperate and they're not nice, but it's certainly not the animal's fault.
Yeah. Let's talk about something better. Vegan Summerfest. You and I have never been to Vegan
Yeah, which is
Summerfest.
ridiculous.
It's an annual event that is.
It's been going on for 250 years or something.
It's very old, and I have
started
not been there.
before the revolution, I think.
Yeah, I think that Jesus was the original speaker. But I'm an atheist Jew, so don't believe me.
And unfortunately, they didn't record it, so nobody
Yeah.
believes to this day that,
Yeah,
that Jesus was
totally.
vegan, which he was.
But the time that Santa spoke, they did record that. So Santa's vegan. We know that. All right. Our occasional wingman, Michael Dorf, was not only there this year, but he gave a couple of talks, and we figured you'd like to hear what he had to say, seeing as he's quite the smarty pants.
He is.
So we recorded this just a few days ago, so let's turn to that now. Well, once again, we are thrilled to welcome Michael Dorf to the podcast, our friend Michael. And let me just say, welcome back to the podcast, Michael. I mean, it feels almost like I shouldn't be welcoming you because you're just you're always here, like in the best possible way.
I think we decided that Michael's title was honorary hen.
Thank you. Yes, so we went with rooster, but we decided against that for good reason.
Yeah. Let's not gender.
I like friend of the show.
But I like wingman.
Oh, yeah,
but,
wingman's
also
good.
a little gendered. Yeah, wingman.
Honestly,
is good.
Wing person.
No, friend of the show sounds like a euphemism or something, like friend of Dorothy, or I don't know. So regardless of what you are, you're Michael, and you teach constitutional law. Well, you know this. I'll tell our listeners. Michael teaches constitutional law at Cornell Law School and is a passionate animal advocate and vegan, and no stranger to our henhouse. He is here to share with us some of the talks he gave at this year's Vegan Summerfest, which Mariann and I yet again didn't go to. So we're here to hear from you, but we're also here to just be jealous of you. For anyone listening to this who might not be familiar, tell us what Summerfest is.
Yeah, so this is a conference that's been going on for over 50 years now. It's sponsored by the North American Vegan Society, formerly the North American Vegetarian Society. It used to be called Vegetarian Summerfest, although it was always vegan. It meets on the campus of the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, which is a lovely satellite campus of the University of Pittsburgh. It's, depending on how long you go, either 4.5 or sort of 2+ days of sessions, activities. It's focused on, what I think of as the 3 pillars of veganism. So animal rights, environment, and health. I invariably give talks on either animal rights or sort of activism around animal rights. I started going in 2009. I've gone every year except for the pandemic years. I went originally just to, listen and learn. Over the years, as I integrated more of my veganism into my own scholarship, I've started giving talks. And this summer I gave 4 brand new talks. Typically, speakers will repeat at least 1 or 2 of their talks from past years for people who are first timers. But I decided that the material I'd given before, while it might appeal to some newcomers, was a little stale for me. So I wanted to give 4 new talks, and I'll tell you about them. So one of them was called Human Rights for Non-Human Animals. And the idea here was to talk about animal rights within the framework of human rights. Now, this was sort of new for me, but not entirely, because back in the fall of 2019, Sherry Kolb and I gave a seminar at Cornell with roughly the same title. It was about the relation between human rights and animal rights. And the upshot, I think, is that you can think of human rights, and I think lots of people who are not in our movement think of human rights this way, as at best indifferent and arguably antagonistic towards animal rights. But it is also possible to see overlaps and ways in which they can work together. Part of what I said, and this was completely new at this conference, was that if you actually go back to the origin of human rights, which is actually a pretty new idea. It comes out of World War II and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a declaration by the United Nations. It is not itself a separate treaty, but it has the status of a treaty because all of the member states of the UN have acceded to it. It talks about human rights, but I think two things are salient about it. One is the use of the term human rights was not originally intended, for the most part, as a term of exclusion. So they weren't thinking of rights for humans as opposed to non-human animals. Rather, the idea was to make it as universal as possible. So rather than rights of citizens, rights of adults, rights of competent persons, rights of people of particular races or gender or whatever, they wanted to go universal, and they use the term human. And I know this because many years ago I co-taught a class for a few years with a professor named Lou Henkin, who is sometimes referred to as the father of human rights law. Now, Lou didn't play a major role in the drafting of the Universal Declaration, but he knew everybody who did and studied it a lot. And he used to talk about it in just those terms, that the term human rights was an effort to go as broad as possible. So that was part of my pitch. Another piece of it was to actually go through the Universal Declaration and point out how many of the rights identified can apply to non-human animals, rights against torture, rights to be, free of bondage, rights against exploitation, etc. Not all of them. Some of the rights there are what we might think of as political rights. So, right to vote, for example. But, there is a great deal in which a lot of the ways in which it can be seen as applicable. And then I talk a little bit about efforts by people in our movement to leverage human rights either in the Universal Declaration or in other contexts. So you think about the Non-Human Rights Project leveraging habeas corpus law to leverage human rights and apply them to animals. That's one way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about it is to use documents like the Universal Declaration as a model for a broader notion of rights. So you can think about that in terms of things like, the new book by John and Raphael, who were on the Animal Law podcast relatively recently. They've got this new book called Animals and the Constitution, right, in which they are drawing on existing human rights documents to say, well, what would it look like if we had human rights in a constitution, could be in an international document for animals. So that was that talk, and I enjoyed it. People had interesting questions. It was really a nice discussion.
Let's pause before you tell us about the other talks. Sorry, Mariann, go ahead.
Yeah, because I did want to just, I also wanted to mention that Stephen Wise, of course, was very inspired in founding the Non-Human Rights Project by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the ideas that it put forth. And I just had I mean, I've always thought of it as something that we're so used to hearing about human rights, but it's a very radical concept, like to extend rights to everyone. Only then all of a sudden, like we came along and said, well, it's not actually everyone. But one of the things you brought up in your blog that I just wanted to ask you about briefly, I know it's a complicated issue. Like, as you point out, the principle of equality, which is a really important part of thinking about human rights, it gets pretty hard when it's easy when you're talking about one species, like all of the humans, like no matter if they're the smart humans or the stupid humans or the white humans or the black humans or whatever, all the humans. But species, when you're including them all, which you start doing when you start to, it gets a lot more complicated. And the questions of equality become, I'm not sure you thought that they were a stumbling block, but something that has to be discussed.
No, I think
right?
think that's right. So you're referring to a blog post I had previewing this, and so here's the basic problem, right? Among the rights is the right to equality, and one way of thinking about that with respect to humans is, you can't privilege one human over another based on their race, based on the fact that they're smarter, that they're younger, that they're older, that they have more money, although, of course, there are all sorts of ways in which people who have more money can get more in various ways.
But these are
yes,
a fundamental list,
right.
which you're not allowed to, even though that's broken all the
That's
time.
right.
But it's not that they can't be differentiated in any way,
Right. So,
but in these fundamental
right.
ways.
And so I think there are a number of ways of dealing with that. One way, which you see in, I think most clearly in the work of Martha Nussbaum, who is very sympathetic to animal rights. She's not fully vegan, but she's been moving in that direction in recent years, is to say, well, equality means being treated equally, taking account of your capacities. So it doesn't treat bears unequally to deny them the right to vote because they're not going to be able to exercise that right in a meaningful way. And I think that gets you pretty far, but I don't think it gets you far enough to really embrace equality in the way we ordinarily mean it. So, think about something like eligibility for an organ transplant, right? We have a system by which the ordinary rules of the market don't even apply to organ transplants. You're not supposed to be able to buy your way to the top of the list. It's supposed to be, whoever has the greatest need, who's been waiting the longest time, et cetera. And there are rules in place. Now, they're not executed perfectly, as we've learned recently, but you could imagine the uproar if you said, well, equality means equality. And so if there's a squirrel who needs a kidney, that could go into a human. I realize you would have to be a gigantic squirrel.
The hypothetical has escaped us for the moment.
Let's not make it a squirrel. Let's make it a pig. Right. There are a lot of organs that are now transplanted from
even a chimpanzee.
Yeah, well, sure. But let's say that they're using valves from pig hearts. They kill the pigs to put in humans. Well, many of us can object to that, but you have to go. You'd say, well, if you had a real principle of equality, you might say, well, if a heart becomes available and it could be transplanted into either a human or a pig, equality means that the pig gets sort of equal billing. And I don't think the Nussbaum, capacity approach differentiates between the pig and the human in that case. Okay. And I think that most, the vast majority of people have the intuition that not only would it be wrong to give that heart to the pig, but that it would be monstrous, right? So I think you need some other approach. And my other approach is to actually reject the principle of equality, which I don't think we need for our movement, right? That is to say that the basis for animal rights is the relatively, I think, uncontroversial proposition that one oughtn't to cause suffering or other harm to a being capable of experiencing suffering or harm without a good reason. And we have no good reason to do all of the things that we do. You don't need the principle of equality to get you that.
I love it.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. And yeah, of course it doesn't work and doesn't need to.
You mentioned that you had gotten some great questions on this. I'm just, curious what people's reactions were.
Yeah, mostly they were of two forms. And this was a little bit like what I think some of the questions, Mariann, that you were asking of John and Raphael. One is, how realistic is this, right? People trying to operationalize it. And then the other was sort of in the other direction were examples of ways in which people might be able to take advantage of this. So, pointing. So I had put the, excerpts of the Universal Declaration up, and I pointed to particular propositions that didn't have to be restricted to humans. And some people had interesting ideas about how actually that's true of a lot of other documents as well, even some of the other provisions of the Universal Declaration. It reminded me of a talk I attended many, many years ago. It was at least 20 years ago, at which a then colleague of mine was talking about torture, almost entirely about torture of humans. And it was, if it was 20 years ago, you can see it was coming out of the Iraq war and Abu Ghraib.
Abu Ghraib.
Yeah. So, and of course he was against torture, but just sort of in passing in the course of it, he talked about how this was a denial of what it is fundamentally about to be human. And so I raised my hand and said, no, that's not what it's fundamentally about. I said, there are some rights that are fundamentally about being human, but being free from torture is about being capable of experiencing torturous pain, which lots of animals can experience. And so this is not a distinctively human capacity. And he sort of said, oh, that's an interesting point, and then, of course, moved on, and I heard him make the same point some other time. But it is remarkable to me, I think, that a lot of what we think of as the most basic human rights are easily applicable to animals as well.
I know we have a lot more to cover, but I just also wanted to mention, particularly vis-a-vis what you were just saying, that one of the things that really struck me about your blog post, and we'll link to that in the show notes, was the fact that they put out this Universal Declaration for Human Rights, and without any kind of philosophical basis, like it wasn't a utilitarian approach or a deontological approach, which made me so happy because I hate that shit.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'm an intuition kind of person, I guess. I don't know. I have no excuse for myself. But I really love that this incredibly important document didn't have to figure out why. They just did it.
Yeah. So, and this was a point that Lou Henkin had made when we taught that seminar, that was seen as a feature, not a bug. That is, you're not going to get the nations of the world to agree that, okay, we're all, utilitarians in the way of John Stuart Mill, or we're deontologists in the way of Immanuel Kant, or to agree on some religious ground for human rights. So rather, they just sort of stipulated we have these rights. There's a suggestion that there's a kind of pragmatic basis for recognizing human rights, that it's going to prevent international military conflict. But that's not really what's at the core. At the core is just a kind of stipulation that these are rights that we think we have.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that's a nice segue, if we can, to talk about one of my other talks. So,
Absolutely.
One of my other talks wasn't really a talk. It was just a sort of a Q&A, and I did this together with Mariann Engel, who is a philosophy professor at the University of Northern Illinois, and friend of mine whom I first met at Summerfest. So he's got a number of really great papers about this. This was called Ask an Ethicist. Now, I didn't come up with the title. Mariann did. I don't think of myself as an ethicist, or I think of myself as an aspiring ethical person, but I don't have any special expertise in this. But in any event, it was sort of ask an ethicist and a lawyer. And the idea was, bring your questions that you puzzle over, and we'll try to address them. And the reason I think of this as a segue is that one of, I think, the distinctive features of Mariann's best work in animal rights is that he doesn't make any assumptions beyond the most minimal ones. He says you don't need to be a utilitarian, you don't need to be a deontologist, you don't need to be a virtue ethicist, any of those things. He just says you just need to agree with the proposition that I stated a while ago, right, which is that it is wrong to harm an animal for no good reason. If you believe that, for whatever reason you believe it, either it's just your intuition, you get it from your religion, you get it from some philosophical school of thought. If you believe that, he then wants to show that you should be vegan. And most people will say they believe that, and actually I think do believe it. It's just they don't realize that their actions are not in conformity with that proposition once they sort of spell it out. So that was the sort of backdrop for this talk. And then we just sort of opened it up to people's questions. And, one of the things that was kind of interesting was it wasn't clear that people were distinguishing between ethical questions and what I would think of as sort of tactical or strategic questions. So we got a lot of, we spent about 20 minutes talking about, trying not to talk about, but in response to a question, talking about whether it's ethical to feed meat to your cats.
Oh, God. Yes. Like, have you ever been at a vegan event where you didn't spend at least 20 minutes on that?
Right. So, we talked about that. We talked about agent relative duties and et cetera. And so, we got through that. And then a lot of the questions, somewhat to my surprise, were of the, what do you do sort of question, right? These are social situations, so they're less about what's the ethical thing to do. You're at a dinner party, somebody serves something that's not vegan. Do you eat it? Right? I think the ethical answer to that is no, you don't eat it. But what do you say? Do you speak up? So, this goes back to what you were saying a little bit earlier, Mariann, which is I don't think most people really want to think about philosophy in the way that academics sometimes do, which is, oh, here's an abstract question. What's the, let me think about this systemically. Let me compare it to all these other possibilities, and let me figure out how to make the whole system cohere. And then I'll come up with a fancy name for it and talk about how that fits with other people's jargon, right? They just want to know, all right, what should I do? So that was kind of interesting. It was my least well-attended talk only because they scheduled it for the Sunday as people were packing up.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. The Sunday talks never get
Right.
anybody. Yeah.
So anyway, I felt very well prepared to talk about those kinds of questions, even though that's not what I had expected, because that aspect of it, like, what do you do when someone asks you this, that, or the other thing, came out of a talk and eventually the book that Sherry wrote that became Mind If I Ordered a
course,
Cheeseburger.
the masterwork.
So that was, in that sense, although this was doing this particular talk as it was labeled with Mylan was new, it wasn't really a new talk for me.
I think it does bring up a little bit of an issue, which I don't want to complain about vegans, but sometimes I think people worry so much about their personal behavior and whether they're doing the right thing, which is important. But being the perfect vegan isn't as important as being an activist. I mean, to the extent that you can be. And so it's not just about your own behavior. It's also about trying to communicate with other people your thoughts about their behavior.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that part of being a good activist is modeling how it is possible to be a principled vegan in the world without driving yourself or other people crazy.
Yeah. I haven't figured that one out yet.
The part about being driven crazy or the part about driving other people crazy?
I was talking about driving other people crazy, but yeah, they both kind of fit.
Okay, so let me talk about the other two talks. So this one was fun. It was called Activism for Introverts. And
yeah, can we say, first of all, that you are not qualified to teach this course? I'm sorry.
Okay, so first of all,
I could have taught this course.
It depends on what you mean by introvert, and that was part of my pitch.
That's what the extroverts always say.
Right.
They say, "Oh no, I'm not a total extrovert. I have this introvert-like moment."
Right. Yeah. So okay, it is sometimes said that an extrovert is somebody who gets energized by being around people. An introvert gets energized by sort of being off on their own. I would think of myself, if that's the definition, I think of myself as a mesovert. That is, I get a little bit of each from both situations. If I'm by myself too much, that makes me a little stir crazy. If I'm around people too much, I sometimes need to, retreat. But I made clear that really I chose that title simply as a teaser to bring people in. The main topic of the talk was how to be an activist if you are not comfortable doing stereotypically activist things, like handing out leaflets, like tabling and talking to strangers, like going to demonstrations and chanting slogans, right? If all of that makes you uncomfortable, does that mean you have to either not be an activist or just get over it and go outside your comfort zone? And so I wanted to offer a third option, which is other ways of being an activist. And so, there are lots of other ways of doing that. It's interesting. I don't think of myself as an activist, although other people refer to me that way, because I don't think of like what I write, which is my principal form of activity, as activism. I think of it as just, sharing my views about things. And it's true, I hope to persuade people, but I guess, that's a kind of activism.
Well, we take a very broad view of what counts as activism here at our hen house, and we always have. So on our view, you would be an activist for sure.
No, and on my view now as well, but I didn't used to think of myself that way. So I talked about, doing work for organizations that are promoting animal rights behind the scenes, right? You can work off camera. You can do organizational work. Here's an idea that came up during the sort of workshop period of this session. Somebody said, well, if you're shy or uncomfortable talking to strangers when you're tabling, do the setup and the cleanup for the tabling rather than the actual talking to people. That way, the people who are sitting at the table will really appreciate that they don't have to set up and clean up afterwards. I suggested that if you have artistic skills, you can, make posters. You can compose slogans, whatever it is. And so it was really a way of getting people to understand that, just as you said, there are many forms of activism. It did include one bit of, I would say, coerced activity in that at the end, for the last 15 minutes, I broke people up into groups of 3. And I had them, Mariann, you're looking horrified.
You did that to introverts? You're a monster.
Well, it was voluntary. I mean, I said coerced, but I said you don't have to do this if you really don't want to. But everybody stayed and did it, and I broke them up into 3, and I assigned them, different roles to play in a sort of social situation about how you would handle it. And then we came back together and reported and discussed it. And I mean, I guess this was a group of self-identifying introverts, but they all seemed pretty comfortable, maybe because they felt like they were among friends and, there were no stakes after all.
Can I ask a question? I don't quite know how to word this, but do you think that the culture of activism or animal activism over relies on extroversion and what we might be missing by sidelining quieter voices?
Yeah, probably. And I don't think that's unique to the animal rights movement.
No, that would be known as the world.
Yeah, right. I can't remember the name now, but there was this great book, name of the author, called Quiet.
Oh, yeah, I loved that book.
About all the ways in which we benefit from listening to introverts.
Who are much smarter than extroverts. That was one of the points of that book.
So it's not just doing stuff behind the scenes, but it's being sort of more thoughtful. This is a digression, but I've often thought about this in the context of law faculty hiring. So your sort of stereotypical law professor is somebody who's very performative. But I've often found that the teachers I learned from the most were sort of quieter, and their presentations weren't dramatic, but they weren't boring, because if you paid attention to the ideas, they flowed very nicely. It's just that they weren't, bombastic about it. So, certainly these days, when there seems to be a premium on, yelling, and we have the so-called attention economy, I think we are absolutely undervaluing introverts in activism and everything else.
One of the ways this plays out, I think, is I don't want to get wound down into this, but social media. I mean, a lot of people, all of their activism is social media related, which I think social media can be a very valuable form of activism. And it completely, I was in animal activism before there was social media, and it completely changed everything. But at the same time, it can be limiting. So I think it's something everybody has to keep an eye on, whether they're using their social media well.
We talked a lot about social media in this session.
Yeah, I would think so.
And, one of the ways I think that social media is undoubtedly helpful is as an organizing tool, right? So you bring people together through social media, and then if possible, you bring them together in the real world to actually do things. Although they don't have to be in the same space to do that. They can be getting ideas from one another and then taking them out into their respective communities. But there's also a question of, how you are coming across in social media. Are you alienating more people than you're winning over?
Absolutely. No, there's a lot of skill in doing social media well. And if you're doing it well, you can reach a lot of people.
Yeah. All right, let me talk about my fourth and final talk, which was called Free Speech for Animals. Which I began with a little joke, which was, well, wait a second, are the animals talking? And then, I had a picture of Coco the gorilla, who, of course, was capable of
nice touch.
Communicating through language. This was focused mostly on issues of free speech that intersect our movement. So I talked quite a bit about ag-gag. I talked a bit about labeling laws and how they infringe on the ability of people and firms to sell vegan products labeled as, soy milk, oat milk, cheese with, spelled with Z or whatever it is, and talked about ways in which one might successfully attack those sorts of laws using free speech. So in that sense, it's free speech for animals. But then I also talked about ways in which free speech can be used against our movement. So I focused there on the Stevens case, right, from the Supreme Court, as a 2010 case in which the Supreme Court, on freedom of speech grounds, struck down the law that made it a federal crime to depict illegal acts of animal cruelty. It was passed in response to this phenomenon of crush videos, which are these, awful videos of people torturing small animals and killing them, basically snuff films for animals. Supreme Court nonetheless struck it down 8-1. I highlighted there Justice Samuel Alito's dissent because, I disagree with Justice Alito almost all the time. So it was my one opportunity to say, but actually, on animals, he's probably the least bad of all 9 of them.
It's bizarre. Yeah. It's bizarre.
And we talked about, so I ended up talking for something like, 45 or 50 minutes of the hour because there's a lot to get through.
Fascinating case. It's a fascinating case.
Yeah, and there are lots of cases. We talked,
I
we talked about some of the Non-Human Rights Project stuff, which is not free speech exactly, but it's connected. This was great for me, not only because the sessions I thought went really well, and I learned a lot, but also because I'm going to be teaching a seminar this fall, starting next month, at Cornell called Animals in the Constitution, which is the same title without the subtitle as John and Raphael's book. But we'll spend sort of a day and a half on free speech issues, which I think are super important. Actually, I think it's 2 days all total. So this was a way of...
it's so exciting. I wish I could take that course.
Well, Mariann, it's only a 2-hour drive from Rochester to Ithaca.
Can I ask you a question? I mean, this is obnoxious, but I have you here, and I have this question about Stevens, and I could be making it up. But one of the arguments I think that the majority set forth for finding the statute to be overbroad, I found these arguments to be so, not cynical, like so revealing of society's attitudes. They said, well, it would ban hunting videos. Because, they did have exceptions for like educational or cultural things, but they're like hunting videos are just really, entertainment. I was like, well, why can't they ban hunting videos? It was so obvious to the court that, of course, they didn't want to ban hunting videos. I mean, that's fine. So it was clearly overly broad. But to me, it's just obvious that if we want to ban hunting videos, we should be able to ban hunting videos under the First Amendment.
Yeah,
doesn't make anything overly broad.
Yeah, there were really two. This might be more appropriate for the Animal Law podcast than for the Hen Report, but I'll go ahead with it.
Yeah, I knew I was getting into the weeds, but I had to grab the opportunity.
Yeah, there were really 2 issues in the case. The first is whether depictions of animal cruelty are what's called a proscribable category. That is a category that is removed from free speech protection. So obscenity is such a category. Most relevantly, so is child pornography. And the reason why child pornography is considered prescribable is that it incentivizes the creation of the child pornography, which is a direct harm to the children who are, by definition, can't legally give their consent. And so the government, in defending the law, had argued, well, the same thing applies here. You don't want to incentivize the creation of these videos because they're cruel to the animals. And of course, the way in which that failed, both for the prescribable category and then for the second issue, which is whether the law was overbroad, was that the court was like, well, wait a second, we don't want to disincentivize hunting. Hunting is a legally protected, in some states, it's constitutionally protected activity that's perfectly innocuous. And so, this to me highlights one of the challenges of making legal arguments to people who are a little bit on board, but not fully on board with you. So this will certainly come up when in my seminar we talk about now Chief Judge Wilson's dissent in the Happy the Elephant case, which is a wonderful dissent, but it does, have to draw the line between elephants and animals used in animal agriculture. Now, I think he does, you know, he does as much as you possibly can for somebody who's not like a committed vegan wanting to overthrow animal agriculture in saying, well, we don't have to address that case now, rather than saying that case is completely different. But certainly at the Supreme Court, in the Stevens case, that was part of the dilemma, right? Which is that lots of things that are legal to do to animals are actually cruel. So if you criminalize depictions of animal cruelty, you're criminalizing, what we do to, the vast majority of animals that come into contact with humans.
I want to bring it back to a more of a non-legal focus question about this, because I too am fascinated by this subject, but most of what you just said went completely above my head. So in the upcoming seminar that you're talking about on animals and the Constitution, you are zeroing in on speech. So what are some of your favorite, or I don't know, maybe most surprising constitutional cases that touch on animals?
So it's not just speech. We're going to talk about lots of things. We'll talk about standing is one of the questions that I think this bores a lot of lawyers, so especially non-lawyers. But a way to think of it
I have had so many students say that when they took constitutional law, not from you, like standing was just a total snooze fest and they never understood it. But they weren't they were complimenting me because they were students and what the hell. But what they really meant was that if you study standing in the context of animals, it's so much more interesting and it's so much clearer.
Yeah.
Like the issues just gain clarity because you see what I'm sorry, now we're getting back like I'm talking about legal stuff again. I'm sorry.
Right, so let me make it sort of more broadly relevant. So all that standing means is who can come into court, right? Who has the right to be recognized by the law? And this is not just an arcane question. It has been at the center of some of our most divisive controversies. So if you think about the Dred Scott case, the holding of the Dred Scott case is that Black Americans were not citizens and could not be made citizens under the antebellum Constitution. The holding, therefore, was that there was no case there. Now, it wasn't technically about standing. It was technically about whether there was so-called diversity of citizenship, but it's about the same thing. It's about who is a person before the law. Or if you think about, Citizens United, right, about the campaign finance structure, that's about corporations having the ability to assert rights. It's about their ability to assert First Amendment rights, but it's related to the question of standing. So we're going to explore that using a variety of cases. Another set of issues is about the relation between environmental protection and animal rights. That comes up in the context of federalism. So here's a constitutional issue that is sort of the heart of the original Constitution, the division of power between the federal government and the state governments, right? So I'm assigning an article that has the title, Is the Endangered Species Act Constitutional? Because there's an argument that, well, this is about regulation of species, many of which don't have real economic value, but they might cross state lines. Is that something the federal government can do? Is it something that the states can do? There's a very recent article that's just published by Kristen Stilt, professor at Harvard, and a co-author called Naturalized Rights of Animals and Animalized Rights of Nature that I'm assigning them. And this is really about how animal rights can be used to inform environmentalism and vice versa. This, by the way, I think is something that is, I hope, a growth area. Something that I think I've noticed anecdotally in the last 5 years or so is that increasingly those of my students who are vegan, at least originally, primarily for environmental reasons. Yeah. And that this, I think, is the way to reach young people who are quite understandably freaked out about what we have done to the earth. And they recognize that repairing the earth requires weaning ourselves off of animal agriculture. And so what this article by Professor Stilt and her co-author tries to do is to show that there is a path for getting there.
That is such important work. The insane divide between environmentalism and animal rights activism that has existed as long as I've been doing this is just, it's insane. These movements have to recognize that they're the same thing.
I do see a shift. I mean, I remember when I first went vegan, having in my apartment, this is 20 some odd years ago, having in my apartment a sign that said, you can't be a meat eating environmentalist. And I do feel like it's shifting now, especially as I've been dipping my toe more and more in like environmental work. I'm seeing more and more vegans that I didn't even know were vegan before the conversation. But that being said, I'm also seeing that there are a lot of exceptions for many of these people. Like there isn't the ethic, there isn't that sort of like animals are not there for us to use in any way, shape, or form. And I'm happy that more and more people, anecdotally speaking, seems to be making the connection. But at the same time, are they making the connection? Or I don't know.
So
I think they're closer.
I guess I'll say two things.
Sorry.
So first, this is a line that I've stolen from your fellow Rochesterian Ted Barnett, which is the animals don't care why you don't eat them. So to the extent that they are eating no or at least fewer animals, count that as a W. On the other hand, I do understand why there is the tendency you've described, right? Which is if you're vegan for the environment, you're going to feel the sort of logic of marginal difference, right? Which is, well, if I have this, one cheesesteak or this one, whatever it is, animal product, that's not going to make much of a difference. Overall, I'm reducing my impact in the same way that they might think about, like, I drive an electric car, but if I rent a car and it's a gas-powered vehicle, overall, I'm reducing my carbon footprint, right? So there's a kind of aggregative logic about environmentalism that I think that doesn't really apply if you're being vegan on animal ethics grounds, because, I'm not going to eat that one animal, even if there are, millions more of animals like that. But this is the one that was killed for me, so I'm not going to eat the animal. So I do think that if you want people to be fully vegan, they have to at some point get the animal rights piece. But I also think, and I've seen this with people who've gone vegan for health reasons, once people stop eating animals and animal products, they're much more open to the ethical argument for being and then staying vegan, because they're not going to try to rationalize what they're doing.
Yeah, no, you have to get the meat out of their ears, as I always used to say. I haven't said that in a while. And it doesn't work for everybody. But if you can get people to stop eating meat, you are well on the way to having them be not just vegan, but to understanding the full ethic of caring about animals. But they go together so much, because caring about animals and caring about the earth are, inextricably intertwined. So if people would just get that, if everybody would just listen to me, we'd be much better off.
So this is something I heard Mylan say at a talk at Summerfest a few years ago, which is that, we ought to think of our environmental impact as an ethical matter as well, right? That is to say, if the reason you're not eating animals is because it harms them, well, then you have similar reasons to not participate in activities that are going to lead to greater deforestation and habitat loss that are also going to harm the animals, not to mention harming humans, which is, something that we should want to not do also.
Right. No, if you're going to be an animal rights activist, you have to be an environmentalist. There's no way around that.
So I have one final question, and I don't know if you have any more, Mariann, but I'm just curious, like, you are at Summerfest, you were talking to either a group of vegans or, people who were just about to go vegan, presumably. And yet you're very involved in other circles as well. Obviously, you have this class coming up at Cornell. Do you feel like there would be a wildly different response from, for example, your students if you were giving, let's say, the talk about free speech for animals, or any of these sort of intersectional topics? Like, how do you foresee the difference in reaction being?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to not get a lot of direct blowback. I'm sure that there are things that I say to non-vegan audiences that people come away disagreeing with, but for the most part, if people are either in a class or they're coming to a talk, they're not there to argue with me. I gave a version of the Human Rights for Non-Human Animals talk actually before Summerfest in an undergraduate class at Cornell. So my colleague Sandra Babcock teaches a class in human rights, and to her great credit, she's a vegetarian. She asked me to teach a class on animal rights, and so I gave basically the talk that I gave at Summerfest there. And I didn't get the kind of gotcha questions that people who are opposed to animal rights would typically ask. People listened respectfully, and I got a few interesting questions. I don't know whether that says more about the places I'm talking. I'm sure there are places I could give my talks where I would get that kind of blowback, but I tend to talk the same way when I'm talking to vegans as to non-vegans. Maybe I tell slightly different jokes, or I use the word "we" a little less. But I have one volume.
Well, okay, so I said that was my last question, but I lied. I can't find it right now in front of me, unfortunately, but I want to know what you would say to this. I shared something on my Instagram stories about Fairlife and the recent Vox article about Fairlife and how problematic it is and this and that. And someone who I don't know replied to me and said, this is why I get all of my meat local. And this is why I don't support factory farming. And I just was like, I'm sometimes shocked at how idiotic people are, to be honest. And I'm just wondering if you were on the other end of a message like that, A, would you bother responding? And B, if you did, what would you say? Asking for a friend of yours.
Yeah. So I don't think it would be useful to respond publicly in a way that is performing for the rest of your Instagram followers and your friends' Instagram followers.
It was a DM. It was a DM.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I actually think that written communication is not very effective on that sort of thing because you're going to go back and forth asynchronously. I think a good response might be to say something like, it's great that you really care about this too. It turns out that a lot of the abuses that have been reported among the suppliers to Fairlife, some of these same problems, also impact people who are selling more locally. I'd be eager to talk about this with you if that's something you want, right? So that invite them to have a conversation rather than argue with them on social media or even in the DM.
Right. I love that last bit. Like, if it's something you'd want, I think like giving them the choice might immediately, take someone off the defense. And I have never done that before. So thank you for that idea. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I don't always succeed in doing, but I try to do it when I remember to, is that when I get something obnoxious, this happened to me literally today on the Facebook fans page for my blog, which was today is not about an animal issue, but somebody wrote like a kind of snide rhetorical question that if they had actually read the piece I linked, or even actually the little snippet for it carefully, they would have realized that I was not asserting the position that they thought they were mocking. But rather than say something like, hey, asshole, how about reading before you post? I decided to just play it straight. And I said, oh, actually, I don't take that position. Here's what and I did not invite a further conversation because this guy seems to be kind of a troll. But I've had the experience of people I thought were trolls then being sort of disarmed and then engaging in fruitful conversation where they seem to soften their position.
You do never know on social media because so many people behave poorly on social media who actually, once you engage with them as a human being, they think they're just making a comment, but it can come off very, very poorly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I keep talking to you. I can't stop. I promise I'll stop in a second.
We are reaching an.
I know. But let me just say two quick things. One is, do you think you're hardwired to have a thicker skin, or is this something that you've worked on? And well, actually, let me just ask you that first. Like, do you feel like this is just inherent to who you are?
I don't think I have an especially thick. I don't think I have especially thin skin, but I don't think I have an especially thick skin. I think that in virtue of my sort of status as a, you know, old white guy who's a law professor at an Ivy League institution, people tend to be sort of somewhat deferential. I mean, I do get the occasional comment like, "Hey, professor," in quotation marks. And you know,
Well, if that's the worst thing that
right,
happens all day.
or they'll call me an idiot or whatever, but I laugh those off, mostly because it strikes me as anomalous. I'm sure if that were like, a constant barrage, it would get to me in the way that it would get to most people.
I think I was just born as as they say, like an HSP, like a highly sensitive person, and I've worked on it strategically, like I've worked on myself, and therefore I've worked on that. But it just, I wonder sometimes if some people are just hardwired. And then the last thing, probably, maybe, perhaps, I will say is that I'm in the Buy Nothing group, and I love it so much. And someone asked for a ride to a doctor's appointment, which occasionally happens. And all of these people came down on him saying, I was going to offer you one, but I looked at your page and all you are doing is spewing racism. And then they got into a fight, like this guy at everyone. And he was very Trumpy and this and that. And then someone commented and said, whatever his name was, let's say Dave. Dave, I'll drive you. Like, I'll do that for a neighbor. I don't care like who you are, or what your perspective is. And it's the internet, right? Like it's not real life, but this was a few months ago and I still think about it. And I just sort of like, I'm looking at it through a vegan gaze for a second here. And I guess I'm curious what your impression is of that. And like, if it was like a vegan version of that, which person would you be in the mix? Would you be the kind one who was like, I'll just do this anyway, even though all you're doing is talking about how much you love to eat animals? Or like, what do you think?
So that actually implicates a talk that I've given in the past at Summerfest, which is on intersectional vegan activism. And the big picture takeaway from that talk is that it's not helpful to our movement to be too restrictive about the views people take on other collateral issues, because then you're going to lose the opportunity to form alliances, right? So you want the Matthew Scullys of the world, who are conservative in other respects and might not share our views on lots of other issues, but are committed to the vegan movement. You want to be able to form alliances with them. But I caveat that by saying, but there are certain positions, even on issues that have nothing to do with animals, that are so odious that you're not going to want to associate with them. So that, you're not going to want to give space at your vegan fest to, Klansmen for Animals, or whatever the organization might be, right? And of course, where that line is, how odious does it have to be, along what dimension, what makes it odious, that itself is going to be contested. So I don't know.
And to some extent personal.
Right, exactly.
I mean, we have different levels of tolerance.
Right. So I'd have to want to know like what exactly was the nature of this person's other post that made him a racist.
Right. Well,
also,
it was
like in today's world, like we all have to think about these issues kind of every single day, not just, not particularly about animals, but we're so divided in such incredibly hostile ways. If we can get through this, it would be a miracle.
Thank you. This was great. I really appreciate it. I'm biting my tongue to not ask you my one more question. I really am, but I won't do it.
Well, we're going to have Michael on again. I would like if he will do it once he starts teaching that course, because I want some updates.
Yeah, I'm super curious about the students, because the seminar is full, and I know there aren't enough vegans for them to all be vegans in the seminar. So I want to see how it lands.
Well, I'm sure they'll all be vegan at the end. No, I'm not.
They'll all be vegan during the 2 hours we're meeting each time, because that
Presumably,
right.
Hopefully nobody brings in a burger to eat while you're
Right.
talking.
All right.
Well, thank you, Michael. Don't hang up when we hang up, because we need to make sure you're
Of course.
uploaded. But thank you so much for joining us today on our Hen House for the Hen Report, and for being an honorary hen.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate that conversation so much, especially because he let me continue to ask him questions at the end that had absolutely nothing to do with Summerfest, but it was just like, Michael, what do you think about this? Michael, what do you think about that?
You
Michael.
going off topic?
That reminds me of the time.
I can't even believe that.
That reminds me of the time I bought this chair. No, I'm kidding. All right, so
It is a really nice chair.
My chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for like people with back issues, and it's pretty great, I have to say. The only thing that's weird about it,
quite attractive. I'm sorry for people who are listening, not watching.
But you know that friggin' asshole Joe Rogan, this is his chair, not his person. I didn't take his chair, but like I found out after I ordered it that this is the chair he uses.
I don't think you should like blame the chair.
I know. I love this. It moves with me. It's like all right. So this week, don't forget, we're going to be on Staycay. And next week will be a truncated schedule. But next Friday, I don't know what days I'm talking about anymore. I'm already lost. But we're going to soon have Will Potter talking about his new book, Little Red Barns, Hiding the Truth from Farm to Table. Great title. It promises to be an absolute blockbuster, and you're not going to want to miss that. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you are enjoying your summer, and we'll see you next time.